Deep in the heart of central Ghana, where the rolling hills of Nainahin stretch toward the horizon, lies one of West Africa's greatest untapped treasures. Beneath the red earth and dense vegetation, 376 million tons of bauxite ore rest silently, waiting to transform an entire nation's economic destiny. This mineral, the raw ingredient for aluminum production, represents more than just rocks in the ground. It symbolizes hope, prosperity, and the promise of industrial transformation for a country that has long been known primarily for its gold mines. Ghana's relationship with bauxite began decades ago when geological surveys first revealed the extraordinary deposits scattered across the country. With an estimated 900 million metric tons of bauxite reserves ranking 7th globally, Ghana possessed the natural resources to become a major player in the global aluminum industry. However, like many African nations blessed with abundant natural resources, Ghana struggled with a persistent challenge that has plagued the continent for generations: turning raw materials into sustainable economic growth. The story of Ghana's bauxite industry reflects a broader African narrative. Countries across the continent possess vast mineral wealth, from copper in Zambia to diamonds in Botswana. Yet many continue to export raw materials while importing finished products at premium prices. This cycle keeps nations trapped in what economists call the resource curse, being rich in natural resources, but poor in economic development. Ghana's leaders understood this pattern all too well and were determined to break free from it. As the new millennium dawned, Ghana's government began developing an ambitious vision for its bauxite sector. Rather than simply extracting and exporting raw ore like many of its neighbors, Ghana wanted to build an integrated aluminum value chain. This meant constructing not just mines but also refineries and smelters that would process bauxite into alumina and eventually aluminum products. Such facilities would create thousands of jobs, generate substantial tax revenue, and position Ghana as a significant player in the global aluminum market. The Ghana Integrated Aluminium Development Corporation, known as GIADEC, was established as the state-owned entity responsible for implementing this grand vision. GIADEC's mission extended far beyond traditional mining operations. The corporation aimed to attract international investors who could bring not only capital, but also the advanced technology and expertise needed to build world-class aluminum production facilities. This approach required careful planning, substantial investment, and the right partners. When Rockshire International, a local Ghanaian company, emerged as a potential partner for developing the Nainahin bauxite deposits, it seemed like an ideal solution. The company proposed an ambitious $1.2 billion development plan that would transform the sleepy hills of central Ghana into a bustling industrial center. The proposal included constructing a modern mine capable of extracting millions of tons of bauxite annually, building an alumina refinery to process the ore locally, and developing the necessary infrastructure to support these operations. The proposed joint venture structure appeared promising on paper. Rockshire International would hold a 70% stake in the Asante Bauxite Company, while GIADEC would own 20%, and the Ghanaian government would retain a 10% interest. This arrangement would give the local company operational control, while ensuring that the state maintained significant influence over the project's development. The deal promised to generate billions in revenue over its lifetime while creating thousands of direct and indirect jobs for Ghanaian workers. Local communities in the Nainahin area watched these developments with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. For generations, families had farmed the land and lived quietly in rural villages, where economic opportunities remained limited. The prospect of a major mining operation promised employment and economic development, but also raised concerns about environmental impact and displacement. Community leaders held numerous meetings to discuss the potential benefits and challenges that such a massive project would bring to their traditional way of life. Environmental groups also closely monitored the proposed development. The Nainahin Hills region contains sensitive ecosystems and forest areas that provide habitat for various species. Any large-scale mining operation would need to carefully balance economic development with environmental protection. Ghana's environmental regulations required comprehensive impact assessments and strict compliance with international standards for responsible mining practices as Negotiations progressed between Rockshire International and Jayadec. The project gained momentum throughout 2023 and early 2024. Technical studies confirmed the quality and quantity of bauxite deposits in the area. Financial projections showed promising returns for all stakeholders involved. International aluminum companies began expressing interest in potential offtake agreements that would guarantee markets for the refined products. However, beneath the surface of these promising developments, a critical oversight was slowly revealing itself. In Ghana's democratic system, major mining agreements require parliamentary ratification to become legally binding. This constitutional requirement ensures that elected representatives have the opportunity to review and approve significant deals that affect the nation's natural resources. The process provides transparency and accountability in an industry where large sums of money and long-term commitments are involved. As 2024 progressed, various government officials and legal experts began raising questions about the Rockshire International Agreement. Had all proper procedures been followed? Were all necessary approvals in place? These seemingly routine administrative questions would soon grow into something much more significant. The Ghana Chamber of Mines, an industry organization representing mining companies operating in the country, was tracking the nation's bauxite production with growing optimism. Production had reached 1.7 million tons in 2024, setting a new record for the country. Projections showed potential growth to 2 million tons by 2025, positioning Ghana for steady progress in the sector. However, these figures still paled in comparison to neighboring Guinea, which had become a global bauxite giant producing tens of millions of tons annually. As Ghana's gold mining industry continued to thrive, making the country Africa's top gold producer, government officials increasingly focused on diversifying the economy. Bauxite represented an opportunity to reduce dependence on gold prices and create a new pillar of economic growth. The vision extended beyond mining to include downstream processing that would add significant value to raw materials before export. International observers noted Ghana's efforts to develop its bauxite sector within a broader context of African resource development. Countries across the continent were increasingly demanding greater value addition from their natural resources. This trend reflected growing sophistication in resource management and a determination to escape the historical pattern of exporting raw materials while importing finished goods. The stage was set for what many believed would be Ghana's emergence as a major player in the global aluminum industry. The Rockshire International Partnership appeared to offer the perfect combination of local ownership and international ambition. However, as legal experts continued examining the agreement's documentation, questions about its validity were beginning to surface in government circles, setting the stage for the dramatic developments that would follow. The morning of July 2025 started like any other in Ghana's Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, but by afternoon, it would mark a turning point in the country's mining history. In a conference room overlooking Accra's bustling streets, senior government officials gathered for what they knew would be one of the most consequential meetings of their careers. The agenda contained a single item that would determine the fate of $1.2 billion in potential investment and thousands of future jobs. Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Dr. Kwame Asante, reviewed the legal brief one final time before addressing his colleagues. The constitutional lawyers had been unequivocal in their assessment. The Rockshire International Agreement violated the Exton Cubic ruling's requirements for parliamentary ratification. There was no legal mechanism to grandfather the agreement or provide retrospective approval. The choice facing the government was stark: ignore constitutional requirements or cancel one of Ghana's most promising mining projects. The decision carried implications far beyond the immediate project. Ghana's reputation as a stable, law-abiding destination for international investment depended on consistent application of legal principles. If the government allowed the Rockshire International Agreement to proceed despite constitutional violations, it would set a dangerous precedent that could undermine the rule of law in future mining agreements. Conversely, canceling the project would send shockwaves through the mining industry and potentially deter future investment. Dr. Asante's deputy, Sarah Ose-Bonsu, had spent weeks analyzing the economic implications of both options. The Rockshire International project promised substantial benefits, including direct employment for over 3,000 people, indirect job creation for thousands more, and annual tax revenues exceeding $200 million once fully operational. The project would also contribute to Ghana's goal of adding value to raw materials through local processing, reducing dependence on commodity exports while building industrial capabilities. However, the legal analysis left no room for compromise. Constitutional lawyer Samuel Mensah presented his findings to the assembled officials with characteristic precision. "By the Exton Cubic ruling, without ratification you have no lease," he explained, echoing the Supreme Court's clear language. The ruling had been designed specifically to prevent situations where major mining agreements could proceed without proper democratic oversight. Parliament's role in ratifying such deals ensured transparency and accountability in decisions affecting the nation's natural resources. The international context added another layer of complexity to the decision. Across West Africa, countries were reassessing their relationships with mining companies and demanding greater value from natural resource extraction. Mali had recently renegotiated several mining agreements, while Niger had imposed new taxes on uranium exports. Guinea, despite being a global leader in bauxite production, was exploring ways to develop local processing capabilities rather than simply exporting raw ore. Ghana's decision would be closely watched throughout the region as an indicator of how African governments balance legal compliance with economic development. GIADEC's board chairman, Dr. Emmanuel Asante Krobea, found himself in an impossible position. The state-owned corporation had invested significant time and resources in the Rocksure International Partnership, believing that all legal requirements had been satisfied. GIADEC's engineers had worked closely with Rocksure International's team to develop detailed mine plans, environmental impact assessments, and community development programs. The technical work demonstrated that the Ninahin deposits could indeed support a world-class bauxite operation with proper investment and management. The environmental implications of the decision also weighed heavily on government officials. The Ninahin Hills region contained sensitive forest ecosystems that would require careful management under any mining scenario. Some environmentalists privately welcomed the legal complications as providing additional time for more thorough environmental review. However, the primary concern for government officials remained constitutional compliance rather than environmental protection. International mining companies operating in Ghana followed the developments with growing concern. A decision to cancel the Rocksure International Agreement based on parliamentary ratification requirements would signal that Ghana's government prioritized legal compliance over economic expedience. While this commitment to rule of law could enhance long-term investor confidence, it also demonstrated that projects could face unexpected challenges even after significant development work had been completed. Rocksure International's management team learned of the government's deliberations through informal channels, as official communication remained limited. Company executives had built their business strategy around the Ninahin project and faced difficult decisions about their future operations if the agreement was canceled. The company had already invested millions in preliminary development work and had entered into preliminary agreements with suppliers and contractors based on the expected project timeline. In July 15, 2025, the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources made its decision official. In a carefully worded letter delivered to Rocksure International's offices, the government informed the company that their bauxite lease was being terminated due to the lack of parliamentary ratification required under the Exton Cubic ruling. The letter expressed regret about the situation while emphasizing the government's obligation to comply with constitutional requirements. The announcement sent immediate shockwaves through Ghana's mining community. Industry associations called emergency meetings to discuss the implications for existing and future projects. Some companies began reviewing their own agreements to ensure compliance with parliamentary ratification requirements, while others questioned whether Ghana remained a stable destination for large-scale mining investment. International news outlets quickly picked up the story, with headlines focusing on the dramatic cancellation of a $1.2 billion deal. Financial analysts struggled to assess the broader implications for Ghana's economy and mining sector. Some praised the government's commitment to constitutional governance, while others questioned whether such strict legal interpretation would deter future investment in the country's Natural resources sector. GIADEC officials found themselves tasked with managing the aftermath of the decision while simultaneously exploring alternatives for developing the Nina deposits. The state-owned corporation faced pressure to ensure that Ghana's bauxite resources would still contribute to economic development, despite the setback with Rocksure International. This pressure led to immediate discussions about alternative development, strategies that could comply with all legal requirements, while attracting international investment. The cancellation also triggered broader discussions within Ghana's parliament about mining, legislation, and oversight procedures. Some members called for clearer guidelines to prevent similar situations in the future, while others advocated for streamlined approval processes that could accelerate legitimate mining developments. The debates reflected ongoing tensions between the desire for economic development and the need for proper, democratic oversight of natural resource agreements. Community leaders in the Ninahin area received mixed messages about the cancellation's impact on their region. While the immediate project was cancelled, government officials assured them that alternative development plans were being considered. However, the uncertainty created anxiety among families who had been anticipating employment opportunities and economic development in their traditionally agricultural region. As news of the cancellation spread throughout the international mining community, Ghana's government faced a crucial challenge. How could the country maintain its reputation as an attractive destination for mining investment while demonstrating unwavering commitment to constitutional governance? The answer to this question would shape Ghana's approach to the next phase of bauxite development and determine whether the cancellation represented a temporary setback or a fundamental shift in the country's resource development strategy. In the air-conditioned offices of Accra's government buildings, constitutional lawyers and mining experts were quietly reviewing documents that would soon shake Ghana's mining industry to its core. The year was 2025, and what had begun as routine legal verification was evolving into something far more serious. Deep within stacks of contracts, agreements, and regulatory filings, legal experts had discovered a problem that threatened to unravel one of Ghana's most ambitious mining projects. The issue centered on a landmark Supreme Court decision from 2019 known as the Exton-Cubic ruling. This legal precedent had established clear guidelines for mining agreements in Ghana, specifically requiring that all major mining leases receive parliamentary ratification before becoming legally binding. The ruling was designed to ensure transparency and democratic oversight of deals involving the nation's natural resources. However, as lawyers examined the Rocksure International Agreement more closely, a troubling pattern emerged. Samuel Mensah, a constitutional lawyer working within the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, was among the first to identify the severity of the situation. As he reviewed the Rocksure International documentation, he realized that despite nearly 2 years of negotiations and planning, the agreement had never been submitted to Parliament for ratification. This oversight meant that under the Exton-Cubic ruling, the entire $1.2 billion deal was legally void, regardless of how much time and money had been invested in its development. The implications of this discovery extended far beyond technicalities. Rocksure International had already invested significant resources in preliminary studies, environmental assessments, and project planning. The company had hired teams of geologists, engineers, and consultants who had spent months analyzing the Ninahin deposits and developing detailed extraction plans. International partners had been contacted, potential financing arrangements explored, and community engagement programs initiated. All of this work now stood on legally uncertain ground. GIADEC officials found themselves in an increasingly uncomfortable position as the legal issues became clear. The state-owned corporation had entered into the joint venture agreement in good faith, believing that all necessary legal requirements had been satisfied. However, the constitutional mandate for parliamentary approval could not be ignored or bypassed through administrative procedures. Ghana's democratic institutions and rule of law required strict adherence to established legal processes. Regardless of the potential economic impact, news of the legal complications began circulating within government circles in early 2025, though the full extent of the problem remained confidential while officials debated their options. Some argued that the agreement could be retroactively submitted to Parliament for approval, potentially salvaging the project with minimal delay. Others contended that the fundamental legal flaw meant starting the entire process from scratch, which would likely take years and potentially deter Rockshire International from continuing their involvement. The broader context of Ghana's mining sector added urgency to these deliberations. The country was experiencing unprecedented growth in gold production, but government officials recognized the importance of diversifying beyond a single commodity. Bauxite represented an opportunity to reduce economic dependence on gold prices while developing new industrial capabilities. However, any mining agreement needed to comply fully with Ghana's legal framework to ensure long-term stability and investor confidence. International mining companies operating in Ghana watched these developments with keen interest. The mining industry operates on long-term planning horizons, often involving investments that span decades. Legal uncertainty around major agreements creates ripple effects throughout the sector, potentially impacting investor confidence in future development projects. Companies with existing operations in Ghana needed assurance that their own agreements remained secure and legally sound. The situation was further complicated by Ghana's efforts to reform its mining legislation. The government was simultaneously working on comprehensive changes to mining laws that would shorten license periods and mandate direct revenue sharing with local communities. These reforms represented the most extensive changes to Ghana's mining framework in nearly 2 decades, reflecting broader trends across West Africa, where countries were demanding greater value from their natural resources. Environmental groups that had been monitoring the Ninahin project found themselves in an unexpected position. While many had concerns about the potential environmental impact of large-scale bauxite mining, the legal complications meant that their advocacy efforts were temporarily overshadowed by constitutional questions. The legal uncertainty provided an unintended pause that allowed for more thorough environmental review. Though this was not the primary motivation for the government's concerns, local communities in the Ninahin area began hearing rumors about problems with the mining project, though official information remained limited. Village leaders who had participated in community consultation meetings found themselves unable to get clear answers about the project's status. Some families who had begun making plans based on expected employment opportunities grew increasingly anxious as uncertainty mounted. The lack of clear communication from project developers added to community concerns about transparency and accountability. Rockshire International's management team faced mounting pressure as they became aware of the legal challenges threatening their project. The company had built its business plan around the Ninahin development and had made substantial financial commitments based on the assumption that their agreement with Gaiadec was legally secure. Company executives began engaging legal counsel to explore their options and protect their interests as the situation evolved. Within Parliament, members who specialized in natural resources and mining issues began discussing the constitutional requirements for mining agreements. Some parliamentarians expressed frustration that such a significant project had proceeded so far without proper legislative oversight. Others focused on the need to establish clearer procedures to prevent similar situations in the future. The discussions highlighted broader questions about the balance between executive authority and legislative oversight in natural resource management. The Ghana Chamber of Mines found itself in a delicate position as the legal complications became more widely known within the industry. The organization represented both international mining companies and local firms, each with different perspectives on the situation. While supporting legal compliance and constitutional processes, the Chamber also recognized the potential economic impact of project delays or cancellations on Ghana's mining sector development. International aluminum companies that had been considering potential partnerships or offtake agreements with the Ninahin project began reassessing their positions. The global aluminum industry operates on long-term supply contracts and strategic planning. Legal uncertainty around major bauxite projects creates supply chain complications that extend far beyond Ghana's borders. Some companies began exploring alternative sources while monitoring developments in Ghana. As winter turned to spring in 2025, the weight of the legal issues became increasingly difficult to ignore. Government officials realized that the constitutional requirements could not be waived or circumvented through administrative procedures. The integrity of Ghana's legal system and democratic institutions required full compliance with established processes, regardless of the economic implications for specific projects. The stage was set for a decision that would reverberate throughout Ghana's mining industry and beyond. The Rocksure International Agreement, despite representing billions in potential investment and thousands of future jobs, stood in violation of fundamental constitutional requirements. As legal experts completed their analysis and government officials weighed their options, the fate of one of West Africa's most ambitious bauxite projects hung in the balance, awaiting a decision that would test Ghana's commitment to both economic development and constitutional governance. By September 2025, the boardroom at GEODEC headquarters had become the epicenter of negotiations that would reshape Ghana's industrial landscape. Maps of the Ninahin Hills covered conference room walls, while engineering reports and financial projections filled tables where Ghana's future was being carefully crafted. The contrast with the rushed Rocksure International Agreement could not have been more striking. This time every detail was scrutinized, every legal requirement verified, and every constitutional procedure followed with meticulous precision. Emirates Global Aluminium's negotiating team, led by Chief Development Officer Dr. Saif Al-Daheri, had established a temporary office in Accra to facilitate the complex discussions. The company's approach reflected hard-learned lessons from its Guinea experience, where regulatory delays and community opposition had ultimately cost EGA its mining license. This time, EGA was determined to build partnerships that would withstand political changes and community scrutiny for decades to come. The technical scope of EGA's proposal far exceeded anything previously considered for Ghana's bauxite sector. The company envisioned a three-phase development that would begin with mining operations at the Ninahin Hills, progress to alumina refining, and ultimately culminate in aluminum smelting and product manufacturing. This vertical integration would create an estimated 15,000 direct jobs and support over 50,000 indirect positions throughout the supply chain. Phase 1 of the proposed development focused on establishing world-class mining operations capable of extracting 15 million tons of bauxite annually from the Ninahin deposits. EGA's mining engineers had identified techniques that would minimize environmental impact while maximizing resource recovery. The company proposed using advanced GPS-guided equipment and real-time monitoring systems to ensure precise extraction while protecting surrounding forest areas and water resources. The second phase called for constructing a 5 million ton per year alumina refinery that would process the raw bauxite into aluminum oxide, the intermediate product used in aluminum smelting. This facility would represent one of the most advanced alumina refineries in Africa, incorporating cutting-edge technology that reduced energy consumption and environmental emissions compared to older facilities elsewhere on the continent. The crown jewel of EGA's proposal was a massive aluminum smelter capable of producing 1.5 million tons of aluminum annually. This facility would utilize EGA's proprietary smelting technology, which had been refined through decades of operations in the United Arab Emirates. The smelter would consume enormous amounts of electricity, leading EGA to propose constructing dedicated solar and wind power facilities that would make the operation carbon neutral while contributing excess power to Ghana's national grid. Financial arrangements for the project reflected the complexity of modern, international mining partnerships. EGA proposed a joint venture structure, where the company would hold a 55% stake, GEODEC would own 35%, and the Ghanaian government would retain a 10% interest. Unlike the failed Rocksure agreement, this structure ensured that Ghana would maintain substantial control over operations while benefiting from EGA's technical expertise and financial resources. The total investment commitment exceeded $4.2 billion over a 15-year development period, making it one of the largest industrial projects in Ghana's history. EGA's financial backing came from a consortium of Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds and international development banks, providing the project with stable, long-term financing that could withstand economic fluctuations and commodity price volatility. Parliamentary preparation for the ratification process began in earnest as GEODEC and EGA finalized their agreement terms. The Parliament's Natural Resources Committee, chaired by Dr. Akosua Frema Oseopare, established working groups to review every aspect of the proposed partnership. These groups included legal experts, environmental specialists, economic analysts, and community development professionals who would ensure comprehensive evaluation of the agreement's implications. Dr. Ose Opare had been particularly vocal about learning from the Rockshire International experience. "We cannot allow constitutional requirements to be treated as administrative afterthoughts," she declared during committee hearings. "This partnership will undergo the most thorough parliamentary review in Ghana's mining history, ensuring that every aspect serves our national interests while complying with our democratic institutions." Community engagement reached unprecedented levels as EJA's social responsibility team worked with local leaders to address concerns and incorporate community input into project planning. The company established community liaison offices in major towns throughout the Ninahin region, staffed by Ghanaian professionals who could communicate effectively with local residents about project benefits and challenges. Traditional chiefs in the area played crucial roles in facilitating dialogue between their communities and the international company. Chief Nana Ose Bonsu II of Ninahin had initially been skeptical of large-scale mining operations but became an advocate for the EGA partnership after extensive consultations about employment opportunities and infrastructure development. "This project offers our young people hope for the future," he explained to community gatherings. "But we must ensure that development respects our traditions and protects our environment." Environmental impact assessments for the EGA project involved collaboration between international consulting firms and Ghanaian research institutions. The University of Ghana's Department of Earth Science led comprehensive studies of the Ninahin ecosystem, identifying sensitive areas that would require special protection and developing monitoring protocols to track environmental changes throughout the project lifecycle. The environmental review process identified both challenges and opportunities associated with large-scale mining operations. While bauxite extraction would inevitably disturb existing landscapes, EGA's commitment to progressive restoration meant that mined areas would be systematically rehabilitated and converted to productive uses such as agriculture or sustainable forestry. The company's proposal included establishing a $200 million environmental restoration fund that would ensure long-term ecosystem recovery. International aluminum markets responded positively to news of the Ghana partnership, with industry analysts predicting that EGA's vertical integration strategy would provide the company with significant competitive advantages. The project would reduce EGA's dependence on bauxite imports while positioning the company as a low-cost producer capable of competing effectively with Chinese aluminum manufacturers. The geopolitical implications of the partnership also attracted attention from major powers interested in African resource development. The United States government expressed support for the EGA partnership as an alternative to Chinese-dominated supply chains, while European Union officials saw the project as advancing their strategic autonomy goals in critical materials. These international endorsements provided additional political support for the partnership while ensuring access to Western markets for finished aluminum products. Technical cooperation agreements between EGA and Ghanaian universities promised to enhance local capability in mining, engineering, metallurgy, and industrial management. The company committed to establishing a technical training institute that would. As dawn broke over Accra on March 15, 2026, Ghana's parliament prepared for what many considered the most important ratification debate in the nation's modern history. The imposing chamber that had witnessed the birth of Ghana's democracy would now determine whether the country would become a major player in the global aluminum industry. 9 months after canceling the Rockshire International Agreement, Ghana stood poised to approve a partnership that would dwarf the original proposal in scope, scale, and strategic importance. The parliamentary galleries filled with observers representing every aspect of Ghanaian society. Traditional chiefs from the Ninahin region sat alongside environmental activists, labor union leaders, and international business representatives. University students studying mining engineering crowded into available spaces, understanding that the day's decisions would shape their future career opportunities. Foreign diplomats and international media representatives documented proceedings that would influence resource development strategies across Africa. Speaker of Parliament, Fredhun Alban Bagbin, called the session to order with unusual ceremony, acknowledging the historic nature of the debate. "Today we determine not just the fate of a mining project, but our nation's approach to constitutional governance economic development, and international partnership, he declared to the packed chamber. The decisions we make will echo through generations of Ghanaians yet to be born. The debate that followed showcased Ghana's democratic maturity and commitment to thorough oversight of major economic decisions. Dr. Akosua Frema Ose Opare, chair of the Natural Resources Committee, presented the committee's comprehensive review of the EGA partnership. Her presentation took nearly 3 hours, covering every aspect from legal compliance and environmental protection to economic impact and community benefits. The thoroughness of the review stood in stark contrast to the rushed approach that had characterized the Rockshore International Agreement. Opposition members raised pointed questions about foreign control of Ghana's resources, debt sustainability, and environmental risks. Honorable Member Kwame Aziedu challenged EGA's commitment to local employment, citing examples from other African countries where international companies had failed to meet employment promises. How can we ensure that this partnership truly benefits Ghanaians, rather than simply extracting our wealth for foreign benefit? He demanded, voicing concerns shared by many constituents. EGA's chief executive officer, Dr. Abdul Nasser bin Kalban, addressed Parliament directly via video link from Dubai, providing detailed responses to every question raised during the debate. His presentation included binding commitments on local employment, environmental protection, and technology transfer that went far beyond industry standards. Ghana is not just a source of raw materials for EGA, he emphasized. It is our partner in building a sustainable aluminum industry that will benefit both our companies and both our peoples for generations to come. The economic arguments for the partnership proved compelling even to initial skeptics. Finance Minister Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam presented Treasury projections showing that the EGA project would contribute over $30 billion to Ghana's economy during its first 20 years of operation. Tax revenues alone would exceed $8 billion, providing substantial resources for education, healthcare, and infrastructure development throughout the country. Environmental oversight mechanisms built into the agreement addressed many concerns raised by conservation groups. The establishment of an independent environmental monitoring board, with representation from Ghanaian universities, international organizations, and local communities, would ensure ongoing compliance with the highest environmental standards. The $200 million Environmental Restoration Fund, managed by this board, would guarantee long-term ecosystem protection and rehabilitation. Community representatives from the Ninahin region testified about their support for the partnership, emphasizing the employment opportunities and infrastructure development that would transform their traditional agricultural economy. Chief Nana Ose Bonsu Thaku spoke movingly about his people's aspirations for education and economic opportunity, while acknowledging the need to preserve cultural traditions and environmental heritage. The vote, when it finally came after 12 hours of debate, was decisive but not unanimous. 195 members voted in favor of ratifying the EGA partnership, while 78 opposed and 3 abstained. The margin of victory reflected broad support for the carefully negotiated agreement, while acknowledging legitimate concerns about foreign investment and resource extraction. More importantly, the thorough debate and democratic process provided political legitimacy that would protect the partnership from future political interference. International reaction to Ghana's decision was overwhelmingly positive, with industry analysts praising the country's balanced approach to resource development and constitutional governance. The World Bank issued a statement commending Ghana for demonstrating that African nations could attract major international investment while maintaining democratic oversight and environmental protection. The African Development Bank announced plans to provide additional financing for infrastructure development associated with the project. EGA's stock price rose 12% on the Dubai financial market following news of the parliamentary ratification, reflecting investor confidence in the partnership's prospects. International aluminum prices strengthened on expectations that the Ghana project would provide supply stability in an increasingly volatile global market. The partnership's carbon-neutral production commitments also attracted interest from environmentally conscious investors seeking sustainable commodity investments. Construction activities began within weeks of parliamentary approval, with EGA's engineering teams mobilizing equipment and personnel for the massive infrastructure development required. The first phase focused on building access roads, establishing worker accommodation, and preparing mining sites at Ninahin. Local contractors won substantial contracts for preliminary work, injecting immediate economic benefits into regional communities. The University of Ghana signed a comprehensive research partnership with EGA that would establish the country as a center of excellence for aluminum technology in Africa. The agreement included funding for new laboratories, scholarships for Ghanaian students, and collaborative research programs that would advance both academic knowledge and industrial applications. This partnership ensured that Ghana would develop indigenous expertise in aluminum production, rather than remaining dependent on foreign technical knowledge. Training programs for local workers began immediately, with EGA establishing temporary facilities in Accra and Kumasi. While permanent training centers were under construction, the company recruited experienced trainers from its UAE operations to work alongside Ghanaian instructors in developing locally appropriate training curricula. The first cohort of 500 trainees would focus on mining operations, with subsequent groups preparing for refinery and smelter operations as those facilities came online. Environmental baseline studies intensified as construction activities expanded, with international research teams working alongside Ghanaian scientists to document existing ecosystem conditions. This comprehensive baseline would enable precise monitoring of environmental changes throughout the project lifecycle, ensuring that any negative impacts could be quickly identified and addressed. The data collected would also contribute to scientific understanding of West African forest ecosystems and conservation strategies. The railway construction, connecting Ninahin to the port of Tema, became a symbol of Ghana's industrial transformation. Unlike colonial-era railways built primarily to extract resources for foreign benefit, this modern rail line was designed to support broad-based economic development. The railway would carry not just bauxite and aluminum, but also agricultural products, manufactured goods, and passengers, creating economic opportunities throughout its corridor. By late 2026, the contrast between Ghana's experience with the cancelled Rockshire International Agreement and the thriving EGA partnership had become a case study for resource development across Africa. The cancellation that initially seemed like a devastating setback had ultimately opened doors to opportunities that far exceeded the original project's potential. Ghana's commitment to constitutional governance and democratic oversight had not deterred international investment, but had instead attracted partners committed to long-term, sustainable development. As the first year of the EGA partnership concluded, Ghana had already begun experiencing the transformative effects of major industrial investment. Employment in the central region was rising, infrastructure development was accelerating, and government revenues were increasing. Most importantly, Ghana had demonstrated that African nations could maintain sovereignty and democratic governance while partnering with international companies to develop their natural resources. The story of Ghana's bauxite development had evolved from a tale of constitutional crisis to one of democratic triumph and economic transformation. The cancellation of the $1.2 billion Rockshire International deal, initially seen as a catastrophic failure, had become the foundation for a partnership worth over $4 billion that would establish Ghana as a major player in the global aluminum industry. In choosing Consti, within hours of canceling the Rockshire International Agreement, Ghana's government faced a critical question that would determine the future of the Ninahin bauxite deposits. How could the country attract world-class international partners capable of developing the project while ensuring full compliance with constitutional requirements? The answer came from an unexpected direction as global aluminum giants began circling Ghana's mineral wealth like sophisticated predators sensing opportunity. The timing of the cancellation coincided with significant turbulence in the global aluminum supply chain. China's dominance in aluminum production faced increasing scrutiny from Western governments, concerned about supply chain security and environmental standards. Russia's invasion of Ukraine had disrupted traditional trading relationships and forced aluminum companies worldwide to reassess their sourcing strategies. Guinea, the world's largest bauxite producer, was experiencing political instability that made international companies nervous about long-term supply security. Into this uncertain landscape stepped Emirates Global Aluminium, known as EGA, one of the world's largest aluminum producers. Based in Dubai, EGA had been aggressively expanding its global footprint to secure raw materials for its ambitious production targets. The company's recent setbacks in Guinea, where it had lost its mining license due to delays in building a promised refinery, left EGA searching for alternative bauxite sources to feed its growing aluminum production capacity. EGA's interest in Ghana was not entirely new. The company's strategic planning team had been monitoring West African bauxite opportunities since 2022, conducting preliminary feasibility studies and engaging with various governments across the region. However, EGA's previous reluctance to invest heavily in Ghana reflected concerns about potentially jeopardizing its Guinea operations. With the Guinea license now lost, these concerns evaporated, clearing the way for serious engagement with Ghanaian officials. Dr. Abdul Nasser bin Kalban, EGA's chief executive officer, personally recognized the strategic importance of the Ghana opportunity. Under his leadership, EGA had transformed from a regional aluminum producer into a global industry leader with operations spanning multiple continents. The company's vertical integration strategy required secure access to bauxite resources, making Ghana's high-quality deposits particularly attractive for long-term planning. Gyadec's leadership, still reeling from the Rockshire International cancellation, found themselves inundated with expressions of interest from international companies. The state-owned corporation's offices in Accra became a hub of activity as delegations from major aluminum producers arrived to discuss potential partnerships. However, EGA's approach stood out for its comprehensiveness and the seriousness of its commitment to Ghana's development goals. EGA's preliminary proposal exceeded even the most optimistic expectations of Gyadec officials. The company offered not just mining operations, but a complete aluminum value chain that would transform Ghana into a regional aluminum production hub. The proposal included constructing an aluminum smelter capable of producing finished aluminum products for both domestic use and export. This approach aligned perfectly with Ghana's vision of adding value to raw materials, rather than simply exporting unprocessed ore. The financial implications of EGA's interest were staggering. While the company remained secretive about specific investment figures during initial discussions, industry analysts estimated that a complete aluminum production complex could require investments exceeding $3 billion over a 10-year development period. Such an investment would dwarf the original Rockshore International proposal and position Ghana as a major player in the global aluminum industry. Chinese companies also emerged as serious contenders for Ghana's bauxite resources, though their approach differed significantly from EGA's strategy. Chinese aluminum producers, backed by state-owned enterprises and development banks, offered comprehensive infrastructure development packages that extended far beyond mining operations. These proposals included constructing railways, ports, and power generation facilities that would support not just bauxite operations but broader economic development throughout the region. The competition between Chinese and Middle Eastern companies for Ghana's resources reflected broader geopolitical trends affecting the global aluminum industry. China's Belt and Road Initiative had made Chinese companies aggressive competitors for natural resource projects throughout Africa, often offering financing terms and infrastructure development packages that Western companies found difficult to match. However, some African governments had grown concerned about debt sustainability and technology transfer issues associated with Chinese investments. Gyadec's strategy for evaluating potential partners reflected lessons learned from the Rockshore International experience. The corporation established a comprehensive due diligence process that included legal review, financial verification, technical capability assessment, and environmental impact evaluation. Most importantly, Gyadec ensured that any new agreement would be structured to comply fully with parliamentary ratification requirements from the outset. The evaluation process also considered each potential partner's track record in similar projects. EGA's experience in operating large-scale aluminum production facilities gave the company significant advantages over competitors with primarily mining backgrounds. The company's operations in the United Arab Emirates demonstrated technical expertise in managing complex industrial processes while maintaining high environmental and safety standards. Environmental considerations played an increasingly important role in partner selection as international attention focused on sustainable mining practices. EGA's commitment to carbon-neutral aluminum production by 2050 resonated with Ghana's own environmental goals and international climate commitments. The company's proposal included advanced waste management systems, renewable energy integration, and comprehensive ecosystem restoration, programs that addressed many environmental concerns raised by local communities and advocacy groups. Local communities in the Ninahin area found themselves at the center of renewed attention as international companies sought to demonstrate their commitment to social responsibility. EGA's community engagement team conducted extensive consultations with village leaders, farmers, and local organizations to understand community priorities and concerns. The company's approach emphasized employment opportunities for local residents, infrastructure development that would benefit entire regions, and cultural preservation programs that respected traditional practices. The technical aspects of developing the Ninahin deposits presented unique challenges that favored experienced operators like EGA. The bauxite quality was excellent, but extracting and processing such large volumes required sophisticated equipment and operational expertise. EGA's engineering teams had decades of experience in similar operations and could adapt proven technologies to Ghana's specific geological conditions. As discussions with multiple potential partners intensified throughout the summer of 2025, JEDEC officials recognized the transformative potential of these partnerships. Unlike the original Rockshire International Agreement, which focused primarily on extraction and basic processing, the new proposals offered comprehensive industrial development that could establish Ghana as a regional aluminum production center. The geopolitical implications of Ghana's partner selection extended beyond the mining sector. Both Chinese and Middle Eastern companies represented broader economic and diplomatic relationships that could influence Ghana's international position for decades. Government officials carefully considered how different partnerships might affect Ghana's relationships with major powers while prioritizing the country's own economic development objectives. Parliament members began preparing for what promised to be one of the most significant ratification debates in recent memory. The eventual agreement would require extensive legislative review and public debate, ensuring that Ghana's democratic institutions would have full oversight of this crucial decision. The parliamentary process, which had been bypassed in the Rockshire International case, would now serve as the cornerstone of transparency and accountability in Ghana's resource development strategy. As autumn approached, Ghana stood at a crossroads that would determine its industrial future. The cancellation of the Rockshire International Agreement, initially seen as a setback, had unexpectedly opened doors to partnerships with global industry leaders capable of transforming Ghana's economy. The question now was which partner could best serve Ghana's long-term interests, while respecting the country's constitutional requirements and democratic values.